Well, I think in the first place we must understand that the United Nations Secretary General is a figure that we respect and is an office that we respect. And that Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is not an enemy. We don't regard him as an enemy of Sri Lanka by any means. And our outrage at the content of this report should not be directed against any individual person. It must be directed against the report. Now, it is true that we did urge that the report not be made public, not because we were afraid of its contents, nor because we were unaware that it could be leaked to the international press, but because there was a procedural violation. The panel, the expert panel, was an advisory panel. It was meant to advise the Secretary General on norms and standards and practices of accountability. So an advisory panel produced a report that went far away from that stipulated mandate and those stipulated parameters, and has produced a voluminous report which is exceedingly hostile, biased, and I may say tendentious. So Sri Lanka's main objection really is not to the publication of the report, but to the content of the report itself. And Minister of External Affairs, Professor G.L. Peiris, made this very clear in detail when he briefed the diplomatic community based in Colombo this morning. This is a very serious threat, a very serious threat. We must understand that the panel report is only the spearhead of a multi-pronged strategic effort against Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka won the war by defeating the separatist terrorist army. Now that army was based on Sri Lankan soil, and it was defeated by the heroic efforts of the Sri Lankan armed forces and the sacrifices of the Sri Lankan citizenry. Now we do know that the Tigers were not only an army, there was a supportive network spread throughout the world. We saw that network in action during the demonstrations that unfolded in several countries in the last stages of the war. Now that network, of course, could not be defeated or overcome or dismantled by our military effort because it's located outside the borders of Sri Lanka. That network, that movement has been in action to reverse the defeat that the Tigers suffered and to reverse the victory that Sri Lanka obtained. They have been working politically, psychologically, diplomatically in order to achieve Elam by other means, by creating public opinion throughout the world, particularly the West, by influencing governments and officials in several countries, and attempting thereby to leverage very powerful international actors against Sri Lanka. Now this combines with certain other things that are happening in the international arena. When we think of Kosovo, when we think of Southern Sudan, when we think of external military intervention in civil conflicts in parts of the world today, we know that there is an attempt to stretch a very interesting concept that the United Nations has agreed on, that is the responsibility to protect. Now that was endorsed by the 2005 World Leaders Conference at the UN, but there is an attempt to misuse that doctrine of the responsibility to protect. There is an attempt internationally to roll back national sovereignty and the nation state, whether it was the former Yugoslavia or whether it is Sri Lanka. So the pro-tiger, pro-separatist elements in the diaspora are trying to use that international trend against Sri Lanka. They are also trying to feed into and stimulate a kind of competition or Cold War in Asia. So Sri Lanka is being targeted as a guinea pig, is being targeted as an example for this rollback of borders. This is very serious because this is a Cold War against Sri Lanka. We fought a hot war for 30 years and we won with enormous sacrifice. Now, we have not been given even 2 years to recover, to convalesce, for the wounds to heal, for us to find our own way. Instead, a Cold War has been launched against Sri Lanka. The attempt is to roll back our victory. The attempt is to achieve Tamadilam by other means. The attempt is to impose a puppet administration which will not object to that or which will facilitate that. This is a very serious matter, this attempt to encircle Sri Lanka, to suffocate Sri Lanka. And it has to be resisted intelligently and realistically.